Okay, that little thing is making us live here.
Preparing. She's got it prepped and ready to put up on the screen. I'll also give you printed copies. Or
And the giant one for me.
Easy. We got it printed.
best
Yeah.
case, probably. I can read it. Like we are good. Cool.
Something else here. Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's call the Tuesday, May 25th, 2021 Finance meeting to order. All members of the Finance Committee are present. We have our Finance Director, Robert Manning, present, and our Chief Operations Officer, Jesse Eckenroth, present. So the first order of business is accepting the agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept the
So
agenda?
moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passed unanimously. After this is we have to approve two minutes. First is the minutes of the April 27, 2021 Finance Committee minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of accepting the April 27, 2021 Finance Committee minutes, say aye.
Aye.
That passed unanimously. The second is the May 11, 2021 Special Call Finance Committee meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of accepting the May 11, 2021 Special Call Finance Committee meeting minutes, say aye. Aye. That passed unanimously also. Under ordinances, we have ordinance 2021-20, an ordinance amending budget ordinance 2020-20 to appropriate funds in the amount of $14,000 from the general fund to the finance department line item reappraisal expense. Do I hear a motion on that?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Robert, what is that all about?
That's what we paid the county for reappraisal cost. It's based on their departmental appropriations multiplied by the percentage of value held within your city limits. They take their departmental appropriations and cut them in half. So the county covers half and we cover the other half. Last year, they quoted us around 211,000 and that came in at 226,000. And we've requested some actuals, a little more of a projected spend rather than paying just based on budget right now. However, as it stands, the finance department really could take a $15,000 hit, even on our best day. So in the event that we do pay something close to that, this would be needed to keep us compliant with TCA.
And this is where we saw in the budget for next year
Yeah.
had
You moved it.
increased considerably.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've moved it out of your.
Correct.
department.
We've moved it
So-
in next year's budget over to central administration. Not only is it something that really benefits, it's citywide, it benefits all departments, but also there's a little more cap and wiggle room in the event that did occur
Yeah.
in another year.
And it's likely.
Correct. And we only ever get billed at the end of the year as well.
That's my
So it's
question,
kind of
yeah.
a rush.
Yeah, I get it.
In time, so we really don't want to be up against the clock going forward.
So how much is the reappraisal expense when we do have an actual reappraisal? Like is it every fourth year or every fifth
Every
year?
fourth year, I think this generally covers it. We'll have a reassessment fee that, if I recall correctly, was around $100,000 2 years ago, but you'll have to forgive me. I can.
In addition to the two,
In addition to, and I'll get you some hard figures on that one because that would have been my first couple of months here, and I could be misremembering. I could be mixing up the two, to be quite honest with you.
Okay,
But I'll get you some hard figures after this.
okay. Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Anything from our aldermen or staff?
No question.
Okay, ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of approving, recommending ordinance 2021-20, say aye. Aye. Okay, that passed, that was approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is ordinance 2021-21. An ordinance amending budget ordinance 2020-20 to appropriate funds in the amount of $16,688 from the general fund to the Parks Department line item insurance claims reimbursement. Do I hear a motion?
I so moved.
Okay, discussion.
Yes, what is this? Is this to the building,
This is the barn.
the barn?
This is a culmination of the year's worth of reimbursements that we've received. This isn't the barn, we received a $19,000 check for the flooding in March, and
Okay.
late February, we had some ice damage as well.
Yeah.
And so I know there's benches, and I know there was a boat dock that was damaged. And to repair all that, they're estimating somewhere around, they have one quote for 11,000, another one for around, two others for around 2,500 each. And so the Parks Department throughout the year has covered these costs, and in this most recent, they've been minor, sort of immaterial amounts, but in the most recent, they've requested for the check that we've received to get part of that to cover their costs.
Okay. So this is a direct hit on the general fund again, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I mean, there's not a whole lot we can do about that to repair it, right?
That's true.
Okay, committee, any other questions? Staff? Alderman? Okay, ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of recommending ordinance 2021-21, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is recommended unanimously. Okay, next on the agenda is ordinance 2021-22. An ordinance to adopt a city budget and to appropriate funds for fiscal year 2021-22. Do I hear a motion?
I so moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. I'm sure we have some questions here.
Do you have the newest?
Um,
Do you want the
Yeah.
Do I have the
that's-
latest and
that's the one I've
greatest?
got.
Okay.
Yep.
I have the newest because I got it printed today.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Tell you
They
what,
were off in
just-
line item, they were off by one.
Okay.
So-
The
I want
names
to
are
make
mixed
sure.
up.
I have
Yeah, the
mine.
main, I think it was Central Services that had thrown you off.
Yes.
I called it Sunday and sent them a text, an email.
For anyone who may or may not have.
Thank you.
I think you're right.
Just in the event that you need it.
So can you tell us about this 5.9?
No, I don't have the right one.
Sure, that's that is
He
the
sent that
debt
out
borrowing
Monday.
that we did in late January, early February.
Okay.
And that would be the proceeds. That's the majority of the changes actually to our budget. But the 5.9 is, we did an ordinance in March to appropriate that funds and amended last year's budget. So that's why you see it on there. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to dive in, but
But that won't affect the next year's budget.
That's
just
right.
A financial reporting requirement for the current year
correct.
to recognize those revenues that came in.
Committee?
And the intent on this, if I could, is just to mention that this column should be as amended. right, like,
Where are
rather
you
than,
here?
just on the ordinance itself, talking about the left-hand column, 2020-21. The intent is to show that as amended, we will make changes to it throughout the
Oh,
year.
yes,
And
yes.
so that's kind of why you see it on there too.
So if we have concerns over any departments right now, all we're doing by voting on this is just moving it to BOMA, right? As it stands.
Indirectly,
do
yes,
it
but the other
With
department,
a recommendation or with a negative recommendation.
or a neutral
no,
recommendation.
Or no. And we don't have time
We don't.
to make amendments and hammer this out. We don't have time because there's a deadline. And
Normally, the amendments are made on the BOMA floor.
yeah,
After
but we
each
don't know what the
committee-
other committees are gonna
After each committee reviews.
think and what the results of the different committee meetings are.
Well, I know that I did watch the public safety today.
Mhm.
And I know that there were lots of good discussion with both fire and parks. But if you all feel comfortable moving it on to BOMA without hashing any of that out, I think I would feel comfortable doing that.
I mean, we have to move it on to BOMA. It's a question of we recommend it or not, correct?
We can move it forward with just a neutral recommendation.
Right.
Okay, yes.
Peg, did you want?
Thank you. I was just gonna address,
Mhm.
I think we hammered out for fire, that would be approximately $182,000 increase, which quite frankly is not a lot in the big scheme of the budget. We determined it was, what was that, just 0.3?
Mhm.
0.3%.
The historical about a lot of this is you go over the budget in your committees months prior. Like this should have happened
Right.
Before it came here.
in April, and then you hash it out in the workshops, but we haven't been afforded that.
Like the adjustments that we've just seen
Yes.
over the weekend, we would have had probably multiple. So, to me, my concerns are that we are presumptively, I'm gonna say we are adopting a fund balance policy that would help us make good progress in that, and we see this budget because it has a deficit.
I was gonna say, we do have one finance committee left as well before second reading. I was gonna say there's
For
nothing,
second,
nothing precluding you from at least
We could do-
discussing.
but we have to send it to BOMA tonight.
We don't.
We don't.
We could defer it. We could defer this
Okay.
to, and we could always
Well-
have a special call finance meeting as well after all the other committees meet.
Would you mind if we just kind of summarized the difference from the budget workshop to tonight?
Yes.
Mhm.
Because I think that would provide some clarity
Yes.
on what's happened here. So I think in tandem with the fund balance policy is there's a major change and a major shift from how we're gonna budget on a go forward. There's a lot of little changes, like if we start in revenue, you can see there's about 338,000 an additional revenue. So if you look at the adjustments on the top, there's an increase and sales tax, fines and fees, licenses and permit, contributions and donations, and state shared revenue. After that, it goes into your fiscal 21 year estimates. So the fiscal 21 year estimates are gonna be, they're shown in the budget as a comparison purpose, but they're not for the next fiscal year that we're considering. So what the additional time allowed Mr. Manning to do was to go in and look at what's come in and see if, because he had budgeted kind of conservatively, but revenues continue to come in. And so he was able to update next year's estimates with more data from this year. So we had almost $340,000 of additional revenue that we're projecting in this budget. There's also, then the middle section here is just the estimates for this year. And then the bottom section are those funds that, as Robert was able to go back and see what has been set aside in previous year's budgets for projects that can be applied towards this year's budgets. So it's really just, it was appropriated before, and we're gonna be able to use it in this year's budgets based on the projects that we're doing. That $5 million in there, 5.9 is a financial reporting requirement to show revenues because we had cash coming. So that's the bulk of that. On expenditures, you'll see that 5.9 reflected again because you have to show it, the financial reporting. There's a lot of little, little line items here and there, but what I want to focus on is the decreases when you get down to where it says in the object group, where it says operations.
Okay.
You can see there's these reductions.
I do.
Oh, I got it.
I know it's printed kind of small, but there are these,
Yeah.
you can have that. So this section. There's those reductions and you can see them in red. So what the fund balance policy said was that, you want to, yeah, you can pull it up on the screen.
I believe she's already got it up.
Okay, let's go down to those. Okay. So the bulk of these are based on our fund balance policy that says when you have revenues that are restricted for a specific purpose, those revenues should be used for those restricted purposes. So we have a stormwater fund, and we haven't been using our projects that have stormwater
Needs.
eligible expenses
Yeah.
against our stormwater fund.
Mhm.
So it's kind of new for the city to have a stormwater fund, and we just really have to do a better job at training staff to say, hey, whenever there's a project that has stormwater in it, that needs to go to stormwater fund, right? We have a restricted revenue for stormwater fund.
Mhm.
Those should not be getting pulled from the general fund. So the major reason this unassigned fund balance is coming up is because Public Works went back. They parsed out all the stormwater eligible items in their projects, and they separated them. So what you'll see is those projects that we're pulling money from the general fund are now appropriately placed in the stormwater fund. So that stormwater fund is covering expenses for stormwater projects or portions thereof of our project. So if we go in and we widen a road or we redo an intersection, a lot of times we'll do a stormwater portion while we're in there doing the work. And those portions should be charged to the stormwater fund. So on a go forward, we'll always have those portions of the stormwater put towards our stormwater fund. So that's the bulk of the expenditure shift that we see in the general fund.
Jesse, on the Walton Ferry Old Shackle project, is that for the construction portion of that project? Is that going to decrease our?
That decreases our general fund. So this is the portion that's attributable to stormwater.
Okay,
So what we had to do is we had to say, okay, what's
Are you talking
Federally-
the 375,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not that these expenses are going away. They're going away from the general fund and being
Right.
placed in the stormwater fund. So now when we look at a project, what we're gonna have to do is say, say if it's a $2 million project, we'll say the general fund spending $1.5 million and the stormwater fund is spending $500,000 to get us to 2 million. But that pulls our expenses into the stormwater fund where we're collecting those revenues for.
correct.
And it lets our general fund unassigned balance continue to grow. So we see a huge shift in our unassigned fund balance. I think at the workshop, it was 2.16 million, and now it's 5.4 million.
Mhm.
And those are based on Robert being able to find some of those committed
Yep.
revenues,
Mhm.
pulling the stormwater funds out, and then some increases in revenues. There's some little updates to salaries and benefits, just minor things where we're tying out FICA and making sure that e-pay and merit increases are all tied in there, but those are all kind of minuscule, just kind of housekeeping. The bigger ticket items are stormwater funds,
Mhm.
the increased revenue that
So to
Mr.
me,
Manning was able to
it's a
find.
huge improvement, obviously. Changing us from 2 point something, I can't remember what it was, to 5.4, but it's still moving. It's projected to be less than it is when we start the fiscal year, even though we're going to be putting the percentage of the sales tax revenue towards it. So I don't feel like we're giving it the importance that it needs somehow. And the other thing I'm concerned about is hopefully there will be amendments made, but I feel like some of our budget cuts were so deep that they probably are not realistic. And we're going to end up amending the budget and pulling money from the general fund out of absolute necessity.
Yes.
So if it's not a realistic budget and we already kind of know we're going to end up even lower than this, because if the fire department needs more overtime, we are not going to say, nah, let it burn. We're going to authorize money from the general fund. And there are other examples. I mean, that one's pretty glaring, and maybe they won't need more overtime, but we need, there's so much more work to be done that I definitely would not feel comfortable sending it with positive recommendation. You can talk me into a neutral maybe.
Well, I would be, can I say something?
Sure.
I would be more inclined to defer it until all the committees meet and discuss and figure out what changes they want to make, what's going to work, what's not going to work, needs and wants and that type of thing. And then come back again to this committee to pass it on to BOMA with either positive, neutral, or negative. Because it has to come before BOMA at one
I
point.
do think the budget accurately reflects the mayor's vision for the city. And I mean, to me, it just needs it needs more work. And that's, I mean, of course, we can make amendments, but it's his budget, so he needs to weigh in on those things.
Absolutely.
If I could say one thing, and I certainly, this is just to take that into account. One thing I think is worth noting is on your normal budget packet, there's the beginning sheet for fund balance here. I think what's worth noting is budgeted ending balance and the actual anticipated ending balance. 928,000 to around 6.5 million. I think it's worth noting that we were projected much lower. We were anticipating budgeting to go much lower than that. I think it's certainly some consideration to say that some of these revenues are unanticipated, unexpected, and you're using a portion of that to cover operations in the next fiscal year as well. So I just think it's
That's
worth getting out there.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Kind of like if
also
you find,
add
if you
that,
walk upon a pot of money that you didn't think you were gonna.
Yeah, I just hate.
I totally get it.
in addition to that, these expenditures that are in here are typically not completely exhausted. So there's an amount in there, and salaries and benefits usually is in the 90 percentile range, and not every category is completely maxed out, right? You're in trouble every category. But to come back to the board to say, I need another $1,000 here and $500 here is kind of a waste of everyone's time. So what I think I would recommend too, knowing that that this budget isn't maybe where everyone wants it to be, is I think it might be a good practice if we did a mid-year budget review where we could come back halfway through the year. I think that would give the directors a little more comfort in making their budgets a little tighter to say, hey, I know I can come back at mid-year, and if events come up or I see overtimes, or hoses broke or whatever, I have this opportunity at mid-year to say, revenues are good, they're holding, expenses are a little bit less than we've seen, and I could really use X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that would give, I think staff the ability to budget a little tighter, and it would give the BOMA the opportunity to then at half year, hey, where are we at? Maybe we need to cut the budget. Maybe we can add to it, but it gives us the ability
That's
to do
really
that.
reasonable.
Most corporations do that.
Yeah,
So
they do
I
it
don't know why
multiple
we aren't.
times.
I
Yeah,
think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think if
It's a
we
huge project.
took that approach, I mean, we're into this budget quite a bit this year, but if we took that approach in future years, I think departments could really say, I'm gonna be really conservative because I know at mid-year, I'm gonna have the chance to come back if I'm gonna need a few more items. And that's just because it's, when you're setting your budget estimates, you're 6 months before the year starts,
Right.
you only have revenues and expenditures for the first 4 months of that fiscal year.
Mhm.
So you don't want to cut your department short.
Right.
It's hard at such an early phase when you begin doing this to accurately predict your budget, especially with COVID and everything that's happening. So
Certainly not.
That's a very
but
good idea.
I
think it is
would
sense
echo Mr. Manning's sentiment that you're typically not going to spend everything. This is, if you
Mhm.
spent everything, and usually revenues are a little conservative. So you're usually like this year was a
Mhm.
huge swing. We anticipated deficit. We're way positive. And typically what you're going to see happen is every year, these capital projects, we plan, we budget for them in case we can actually do them. Because we don't want to be at a point where the state says, hey, give me some money. And we say, oh, we got to go back to Bowman and do a budget adjustment. Hold on. So we're gonna budget them. But a lot of them are probably they're not gonna happen this year. They're gonna be the next year. But in case they do, we want to have them budgeted this year. So that's gonna be part of the deficit too, is that we have a lot of capital projects planned for this year. They're probably not all gonna happen. If they all happen this year, we wouldn't have to need to do next.
Robert, if we do that, do we have to get approval from the state comptroller's office for an amended budget at that point?
No, we amend budget regularly and it would,
Just be a
we've just
grouping.
passed that along to
So it
them.
would be just a group, like a
Right.
group being done.
Each time we,
Second revised.
right, each time we amend the budget, these are sort of the things y'all don't see, but we send along
Mhm.
amended numbers to the comptroller's office and provide them with that quarterly or
Mhm.
however, as needed. So
Okay,
it wouldn't be any different than that. And I think it lines up in timing wise with about the time that we start projecting for revenue. I could talk a little more about this later on, but typically as we finish the audit and we close December, we've pulled revenues for the first 6 months of the year. We do a monthly review, obviously, but we do that for the first 6 months of the year and try and project the next 18 months, if you will. And, like I said, I can talk a little bit more about it when we get into sales tax, but I'm not shorting you
Mhm.
purposefully, I assure you.
Sure.
We got good news coming from the sales tax world, but
I have one little nitty gritty question.
Mhm.
There, I see that the increase to the drug fund under assets
Mhm.
for police is 6330, 63,340, but the decrease was 71,300. What's the additional cut?
they have, 71,300 is what it'll cost for the equipment. But in the drug fund, they already had 8,000 in the line item. Typically with the drug fund, there's a portion of the budget ordinance that kind of states that as long as they're spending based upon the appropriate TCA, that realistically they're in bounds to go above and beyond
Okay,
and below as long as they meet.
so they can get vet services as needed, of
Yes,
course.
exactly. And now they can't exceed the maximum appropriation, but outside of that.
Sure.
And so they had 8,000 in there already, so it didn't need to be as great of an increase as previous.
and that's 4 police cars, right?
Yeah, so that's one thing I forgot to mention.
Mhm.
Yes.
So yesterday, basically, if you look at public safety as a whole, which is one team, and then you have 2 departments. What police took from the fund basically offsets the deficit in fire unless more was added, because we've got 182 needed in fire. And correct me if I'm wrong, just in case more was added, but we moved the 146, is that correct?
It was actually more than that.
216.
Yeah.
So it basically offsets each other.
Yeah, so we also took that, and I forgot to mention that we had placed Mr. Manning placed 4 vehicles and equipment from the general fund into the drug fund. So that's another reason that general fund assigned balance went up and the drug fund balance will go down. But that's a restricted revenue again, that's the purpose it can be used for.
Right.
But essentially, would you say it kind of balances each other off?
There's over 200,000 that was moved to the drug fund, so it would more than balance
Mhm.
that difference.
So there's that. So, and I don't know, like, this year's process has been so different. So like, I don't know if you're gonna have all the committees report to you and then, or we're just gonna have a big amendment fest at BOMA. You know, it would be nice to have some of these things worked out in the workshop prior before going to BOMA, because it really just doesn't go well and it's really silly. And it's confusing for our citizens, but to me, police and fire in my mind are even. Like, we could bring fire up, police has made adjustments, and that's happened in other years where fire made adjustments to bring police. So anyway, to me, that's a wash and no reason to not fund anything that wasn't asked for yesterday. But something else I wanted to bring up was you brought up the stormwater, which is very good. And I know I have to report Robert out every year about that stormwater fee, and every year I get different reports of what's happening, meaning that folks who live on the lake, not, they're paying, we have $78 stormwater fee, but they have zero impact on that stormwater because it technically is running straight into our property. So I've heard that, and I have people call me the week before taxes are due, asking me questions. Some people have bills for 78, some people have bills for 38, some people have bills for 18. Typically it's 18. I don't know what yours is, Jonathan. But if we are no longer going to do that, the projection that I see is an additional $48,000. And how I did that was 78 minus 78 minus 18. So it's an additional 60 per 800 houses approximately on the lake, times 800. So it's about $48,000, which in a budget like this could have some merit. So maybe that's something that you all kind of figure out what you're doing this year, and that way the aldermen also have an answer to constituents, because it's really confusing. And Robert has done a fantastic job with that every year, and he's very patient because it's very confusing for people. It's very arbitrary, I guess is a good word. So,
I didn't realize that we charge them differently.
I didn't either.
because we
I had no idea.
because we have no impact on the stormwater. We're draining for the city. It all runs through those
Yeah, well, that
properties.
would make sense.
And that was when we started the stormwater a couple of years ago. I mean, that was openly discussed in meetings, but every year it's led to confusion. So if it is just going to be the same for everybody, that would be generating at least another 48,000, probably more. So that might be something that you look at to get those numbers. Thank you,
Good.
Chairman.
Very good, Peg.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Do I hear a motion?
Or
Defer.
to defer.
I'm with defer.
I second.
Okay, all in favor of deferring this to our next finance meeting, whether it be a special called one or a regularly scheduled one, say aye. Aye. Okay, I think we'll have a special called one because our next one is the very end of June, and we're gonna have first reading prior to that. So maybe we could set that schedule after our meeting tonight, okay? Okay, moving along. Where are we? Okay, ordinance 2021-24, an ordinance amending budget ordinance 2020 to appropriate funds in the amount of $826.92 from the general fund to the Parks Department line item scoreboards. Do I hear a motion? Second that. Discussion.
Was this not budgeted for, or are we going over budget, or?
They, this is we get a donation yearly from Coca-Cola and about $5,000. We've gotten that
Got it.
on the money, $5,000 every year for as long as I've looked back. However, they gave us $5,826.92 this year. And my understanding is the Parks Department's not anticipating to spend anymore. However, they have utilized, bought a few more things in scoreboards, and it will just offset some of their expenditures.
Okay. Any other discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor of ordinance 2021-22, I'm sorry, 2021-24, say aye. Aye. Okay, that was recommended unanimously. Ordinance 2021-25, an ordinance fixing the rate of taxation in the city of Hendersonville, Sumner County, Tennessee. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? This is essentially keeping our tax rate the same with no tax increase. No discussion?
That is a good thing.
Okay. Comments?
Can I hear the motion? Who made the motion?
I think it was me.
I don't think I did.
As long as we're not gonna fight over it.
Okay, right now the tax rate is at 0.9187 of the 25% of appraised value for residential and 40%, I believe, for businesses, commercial, right? Okay. All in favor of recommending 2021-25? An ordinance fixing the tax rate, the rate of taxation in the city of Hendersonville, Sumner County, Tennessee, say aye.
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 Okay, that was recommended unanimously. And now I will turn over the floor to Robert so we can review our reports. And the first one up is the sales tax analysis report.
Sales tax has been received for April. And that is for March activity. And as you can see, we're up once again,
Whoa.
Big number.
quite
Love it.
significant.
Large.
Love it, love it.
And this is kind of what I was referring to a little bit earlier about saying I'm not projecting that conservatively. It's just we're seeing
Sure.
some major increase and some major growth over the last couple of months. And to be up over 400,000 as compared to last year. As you can see, last year was the
Yeah.
first year that we really sort of saw a COVID-19 impact.
Mhm.
And we really only saw that for like the last 2 weeks of March. So $32,000 decrease between the FY19 and FY20. I think normally we would have probably had $30,000 to $40,000 increase. So $60,000 swing there still doesn't really account for over 300,000 plus.
Do
Uh,
do we know where that's coming from? What what revenue streams it's
It's-
coming from?
To be quite honest with you, I thought I knew for the first half of this fiscal year, and I thought I could predict, and I still feel that the beginning of this fiscal year was mainly due to a surplus in people's bank accounts. I think if you're not traveling normally, if you have some trips canceled, you're spending more locally. You also have there were some funds dispersed from the government as well to a lot of
That's right.
individuals. And so they have a little extra money that they normally would not have in the summer. The past 3 to 4 months, though, I think it's truly just, we're just seeing some increased growth, and I don't.
I think people are sticking closer to home instead of going to
Right.
Nashville.
Right.
Right.
They're just,
Home improvements, maybe
Exactly.
Lowe's,
Yeah.
Home Depot.
Which worries me a little bit about projections for
Mhm.
next year, that we might start shopping in Nashville more back where we were. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That worries me a little bit. But let's hope
I
that
also
it stays
think,
on.
yeah, I was saying, I think some people are realizing maybe that 15 minutes is not as far as they originally thought, and coming here is much easier and much better. I think it's nicer than maybe going downtown or going to West Nashville.
and we really do have the things that they
Yes.
want and need.
Yes,
and They
exactly.
don't have to.
Mhm. Do we need to keep
It's a new
that
habit. I hope.
spreadsheet up?
I can stop sharing now.
Because we're over that now.
I'll get this out of the way. I didn't want to mess with Tina if she was.
Oh, yeah.
But
Okay.
to finalize, I think that's going to be about 20% over last year as an increase. We're year-to-date change over 16% right now, which is incredible.
That's incredible.
It is.
That is awesome.
So now you see a little bit why there's
Sure.
$250,000 increase this year.
That's
I was
gonna-
originally projecting 1.3, which would, for this month, which would have been a $250,000 increase.
That's going to affect our little set aside, huh?
Correct. in a good way.
Mhm.
Well, we haven't adopted it yet.
I know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Very true. Hotel motel, we're seeing that come back on the next page. This also was the first month. However, if you compare FY19 to this year, it's only a $2,200 difference. You'll see a $25,000 increase over last year, but the real number you want to compare that to was 2 years ago. When
Correct.
We had, when we were in the full swing and had a few more sports. Even.
Mhm, mhm.
So we hope that continues. That's really good news on the hotel motel front, because that means they're likely to exceed their projected this year, and that just gives a more positive outlook for next fiscal year.
And Robert, in the hotel motel, we budgeted only 200,000 for that, or do we?
Correct. That is correct.
So if we keep up the pace of even 30,000 a month, we'll way surpass
That's right.
that.
That'd be 360,000.
Sure.
And we have 2
$160.
new hotels going up in Hendersonville.
Mhm.
Hasn't it?
Mhm.
So do you, well, maybe we could talk about that 6-month adjustment budget time
Right.
to increase that revenue. We have more of a better picture of that.
So each of you should have a cash flow in front of you.
Yes.
You want one? Yeah. That's it. This is, we've kind of begun our descent of expenditures slowly exceeding revenues for the next probably 4 to 5 months or so. Although April is going to look a little strange, a little more strange usually than normal, because February and March, we do finalize property tax and we receive quite a large number of individuals coming in, either if not the last week of February, but the first 2 weeks of March. So revenues for those months kind of get skewed a little bit. But we will level out. We do think that May and June, well, June maybe not so much, but May will be fairly equal. And we hope to be ending somewhere around the 5.5, possibly $6.5 million range.
And no need for a tax anticipation note
No,
as we stand right now,
I have
right?
full confidence that we can go our 6th year without needing one.
Perfect.
We've kicked the habit. Let's not even consider
I
it.
agree, and I think
Just
that's
like a last
indicative.
resort, yeah.
I think it's indicative of good management on the department heads and working with finance to
Mhm.
make sure that as soon as we do have revenue coming in, that is when they just time their purchases appropriately. On to stormwater. I believe we've collected the majority of what we will collect this year, a little over 2.5 million. I think we'll end probably somewhere, totals, we've collected almost 3.2 million. But 2.5 from stormwater fees, and then around 630,000 from a FEMA grant, for purchasing some land in floodplains. And we've received that funding as an additional unexpected revenue. However,
So last year we didn't spend 1.1 million, is that right?
I see the number you're looking at. I'm sorry.
The actuals I'm looking at.
We spent 2.6 oh, that would be the ending fund balance, for stormwater.
So we didn't spend it then last year. That's what we had left over.
In FY20, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
So we're projecting not to spend 2.7 this year?
This fiscal year, we are projecting, yes, to have 2.7 at the end of the fiscal year. the stormwater.
Hold on,
Jesse,
hold on.
that's a lot. That's a big ending balance.
No, it's 648 on our,
It was adjusted because we just took all those things out
Yeah.
of it.
Um,
That's
Yeah.
right, that's right.
That's-
Okay, so that's not reflected in
648,000.
here yet.
That's right, that's right. It's not
we're
plugged
just
in.
moving.
Okay,
it.
how much were those total projects, Jesse? 6? Do you remember? Oh, never
yeah,
mind.
they're right
Okay,
here.
I don't want to
Hold
put you on the spot.
No, they're right here.
About 1.4.
Can we put them? Yeah, that's what I thought.
1.4.
Realigning
Yeah.
intersections, all
But
sorts
to
of
be,
things.
that's a,
1.584.
Okay,
It's all,
It's on page 45 of your
it's all
budget
this,
document.
that's
gotcha.
110 now, right?
Okay, I just don't want us to have too much left over.
Is that line
If we need it,
110 or
you know?
164? Is
oh,
it,
this-
That's a, so that's a
Fund- which
decrease
fund is
from
it?
the general fund is 110. So this
Okay,
is
so
showing a
this is-
decrease. to the
and
general
this
fund.
is, so 164 is the stormwater.
Correct,
Yes.
correct. And to answer your question a little better, that would be FY 22 is sort of what he's referring to.
That's
in-
correct.
in
For
the-
the projected, right?
That's right, that's right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
this sheet in the committee packet is only reflecting
What we're
last
talking
year.
about, yeah, now.
Yeah.
how
right.
far along we are in the.
Because we haven't passed the
Yeah.
budget yet.
Right,
Okay,
And then-
And
That 16.67% is what we want to keep in all the funds. So we're going to keep some balance in there, but yeah. And with the stormwater fund too, based on the project list that comes in, there may be a year or two where we just save for a bigger project.
Mhm.
We have quite a few projects in the queue right now, so I don't think that'll happen for a few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
But we anticipate to spend that money down. And the American Rescue Plan has also deemed stormwater an eligible expense, so our stormwater may really get bolstered.
That's the
this year.
5.9 million.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Yes. Director Gilly.
Is there any legislation or anything that we need to do to encumber the 500,000 for Mary's Place that was in there this year? Since we won't start that project till November.
I didn't intend it, no. It- Sort of similar to the other capital and special projects, we roll it forward.
Just making sure.
Appreciate you asking.
Okay, does anybody else? Okay, Robert, go ahead.
Okay.
Continue.
Next, review of the finance department's budget. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, we do it on committee level for the budgets.
Good job. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I can give you a brief overview of the main portion of it. Our audit of prior year, you may see a $2,500 increase. on
Where are you? Which
operations.
line number?
Oops, sorry,
640.
640.
Okay.
in operations. That one is more in line with what we anticipate to spend. We did spend 45,500 this year,
Okay,
or excuse me, in the FY 20, but I think of that as more an oddity. We are collecting enough federal revenues now that we're gonna need a single audit every year, and the price that Kraft gives us for a single audit is $2,800. And between ARP, COVID-19 relief, Safer Grant, COPS grant, we're gonna be over $750,000 for the next. 3
and
to 4
reappraisal
years.
expense got shifted to central services.
That's
Yeah.
correct. Reappraisal expense has been shifted to a different department.
Okay, tell me about the new position, please.
The cost of new position at 10,000 is to upgrade upgrade one of our accounting techs to an accountant. Originally, the request had that and a secretary, an admin secretary in it. But all that made it through was the upgrade, and the intent is to repurpose that individual to be able to do a little more reconciliation for us. Currently, they're handling property tax and taking stormwater, and so
So it's not a new position, really.
that's right. It's to upgrade.
to-
The individual actually she should have her CMFO in the next 2 months. She does have an accounting degree.
Good,
Yeah, she'll be the fifth
Okay,
one. We'll have-
excellent.
When she gets
Excellent.
that, we'll have 5 on staff. And I think the department's night and day on
Mhm.
accounting knowledge than it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
It's definitely
That
upgraded
course is, I recommend it to
from 2
anyone
or
on
3
the
years ago.
board. who wants-
Trust me,
Yeah.
definitely upgraded.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you saying that, but other than that, I want to make sure I mention anything increasing postage, training and travel and training is only increasing because of that, the CMFO trying to keep up with CPEs. And computer fees, that is an $1,800 increase, but it does say 25,000. 22 to 23 of that will be going away next fiscal year. We have our legacy system that we need upkeep on for 1 more year. And then when we move to Tyler Munis full time, that's just there until it crashes.
So it's working then, huh?
it's
Finally,
yep, it's working. It's just
no fault of yours.
a lot of
It's been a long time.
work.
Minutes.
And I can answer any questions, but other than that, I only have one thing in the other item.
It looks reasonable.
It's, we have a CTO 253 form to give to everybody at the next meeting, because I don't have it available today because of a mix up. But
What is that?
it is, yeah, that's what I was gonna tell you. It's our refinancing form. I have to give it to everyone. But I intended to bring it up today, but we
You
had
have
a
to
mix
sign
up
it?
with our bond council, unless you want the Hendersonville utility districts, all of their forms, but,
Yeah.
so,
Nah.
kind of mix up in the mail, but
yes.
we got the wrong. But it's all signed and turned in. and
Okay,
we're Ready to go?
Okay,
make a motion to adjourn?
so do we have any other discussion items, questions?
No.
Staff?
I'd like to thank
Jesse?
Mr. Manning for all his work. He gets the budget info to us quickly, and
Yes.
I
Yes.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we
Appreciate
do
you saying
too.
that.
Very fortunate
Yes.
to have him and his staff.
Yep.
Trust me.
Thank y'all. Appreciate this.
All right, now Rachel.
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, visitors,
I
staff,
know.
alternate.
That's all we have, but I'm
gonna take that much.
I do too.
We want to eat pizza. I got some left over.
Okay, let's talk about when you want to have our special called meeting.
Um,
Our first reading of the budget is going to be